paralyzed millionaire thought the date was a joke, until a little girl said, "Mom is coming." The Lisbon Sea lay still that late afternoon, the sunlight spreading across the water like melted gold. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. Inside a seaside cafe called Mar Azul, a man sat quietly by the window, his hands resting on the wheels of his chair, eyes following the passing couples outside. Ethan Navarro, 35, once a brilliant structural engineer and head of a major construction firm. 5 years ago, a collapse at one of his sites shattered his spine and left him paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, his world had shrunk to 4 walls, 1 chair, and a silence heavier than grief. The coffee in front of him had long gone cold. This date wasn't his idea. A friend had pushed him into it. Her name was Clara Mendez, someone he'd only exchanged messages with. She knew about the wheelchair, which to him meant she wouldn't come. No one ever did after finding out. He had chosen a table near the door, ready to leave quickly if things got awkward. He couldn't take another look of pity. That was when a small voice spoke behind him. "You're Ethan, right? My mom says you have kind eyes, even when you try to look angry." He turned. A little girl, maybe 6, curly blonde hair, wearing a pink dress covered in dolphins. Her backpack looked like a smiling cat. "And you are—" "I'm Luna. Mom's coming soon, but she told me to come first so you wouldn't leave." Her innocent honesty caught him completely off guard. No one had ever guessed his deepest fear, that he always wanted to run before anyone could reject him. Luna climbed into the seat across from him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She pulled out a coloring book and began to draw. "Mom says you build houses. I want one with a slide inside. Can you make that?" Ethan's lips curved slightly. It was the first real smile he'd given in years. "A slide inside the house? That sounds expensive." "But you're rich, right?" she shot back, quick as lightning. He laughed, a short, genuine laugh that surprised even him. The door opened. A woman walked in, dark hair in a high ponytail, cream sweater, jeans, simple yet effortlessly elegant. When the light caught her face, Ethan forgot to breathe. Clara Mendez, exactly like her photo, and yet more real, more alive. No pity, no awkwardness, just calm warmth. "Sorry," she said gently. "Luna refused to stay in the car. She has her own ideas about how dates work." "That's okay," Ethan managed, his voice unsteady. Clara sat across from him, sunlight brushing her honey-brown eyes. "You seem surprised." "I didn't think you'd come." "Because of the chair?" she asked softly. He said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Clara smiled faintly. "Ethan, I didn't come here to judge you. I came because for the past 3 weeks I've been talking to a man who's funny, smart, and sees the world differently. I wanted to meet that man." Something loosened in his chest. He touched the cool rim of his coffee cup, feeling something unfamiliar. Maybe hope. Luna looked up from her drawing. "So, Mr. Ethan, when will you and Mom build my house with the slide?" Clara laughed. Ethan just stared at them, 2 people who somehow brought life back into a world that had been frozen for 5 long years. As they left the cafe, the sea breeze carried the scent of salt and something new, the taste of possibility. Ethan didn't know where this would go. He only knew that, for the first time in half a decade, he didn't want to run. Under the Lisbon sunset, a man in a wheelchair, a widowed woman, and a 6-year-old girl, 3 strangers, unknowingly opened the first chapter of a story none of them had expected to begin. Something shifted in Ethan after that day. Not all at once, but enough for him to notice the next morning when he looked in the mirror. His eyes were different, less guarded, less tired. Messages between him and Clara became more frequent. They no longer exchanged polite words, but long conversations stretching past midnight, about architecture, movies, and the unspoken fears that shape people. Clara had a way of talking that made Ethan forget he was sitting in a wheelchair. She made him feel normal. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Clara sent a short message. "If you're free tonight, have dinner with me and Luna." Ethan hesitated. He hadn't stepped into a woman's home since the accident, but in the end, he went. Clara's apartment sat in a quiet neighborhood near the Tagus River. When the door opened, the smell of warm lasagna greeted him along with laughter. Luna ran up wearing a tiny apron dusted with flour. "Mom says I'm the assistant chef. Do you like cheese, Mr. Ethan?" He laughed. "I love it." As he rolled inside, he immediately noticed the design. No steps, wide hallways, lowered counters, handles placed perfectly within reach. Functional, but elegant. Clara came out of the kitchen, drying her hands. "You noticed, didn't you? This place, it's designed for wheelchairs." "It is. I design interiors for people with disabilities. I don't just design them, I live in them." Her words silenced him. For the first time, he saw someone turn limitation into beauty. During dinner, Luna talked nonstop, about school, about wanting a dog, until suddenly she asked, "Mr. Ethan, why do you use a wheelchair?" "Luna," Clara warned gently, but Ethan raised a hand. "It's okay." He looked straight into the child's eyes. "I had an accident. My back was hurt, so my legs don't work anymore, but I can still do a lot of things, just differently." "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore. I got used to it." Luna nodded seriously. "I'm different too. I wear glasses to read. And Mom has a scar in her heart that no one can see." The room fell silent. Clara lowered her gaze. "Eat your dinner, sweetheart." Later, when Luna went to bed, they stepped onto the balcony. The city shimmered below, lights dancing on the river. Clara held a glass of wine, the glow catching in her hair. "She's right," she said softly. "I do have a scar. 4 years ago, my husband, Miguel, died of heart failure. He was a musician. This apartment was my new beginning." Ethan didn't speak, not from pity, but from understanding. Everyone loses a part of themselves somewhere along the way. She turned to him. "And you? What do you miss the most from before?" A long pause. "Dancing," he said quietly. "I used to dance salsa every Friday night." Clara smiled faintly and took out her phone, playing a slow tune. "Then let's dance our way." She moved closer, sitting gently on his lap, her hands resting on his shoulders. Ethan froze for a second, then let himself breathe. Music floated through the night, slow and tender. "See?" she whispered. "You don't need legs to feel the rhythm." He nodded. He couldn't remember the last time someone had held him. In that moment, the armor cracked. He wasn't a broken man, or a CEO, or a patient, just someone rediscovering the simple act of feeling. When the song ended, Clara stood and smiled. "Dinner was a success, don't you think?" "It was," Ethan replied, voice rough but sincere. As he left, the night breeze carried the scent of oregano and Luna's distant laughter. Ethan turned back, watching the light from Clara's apartment spill warmly onto the balcony. He didn't know what this meant yet, only that somewhere inside, a small crack had opened in the walls around his heart. After that dinner, Ethan's life changed in a way he couldn't quite explain. The empty mornings were gone, the long silences between work and night replaced by messages at midnight, spontaneous calls, unplanned meetings. Clara slipped into his life like a breeze, quiet, gentle, and impossible to resist. Every Sunday morning they met at a small cafe by the river. Clara always came with Luna, who brought her coloring book and cat-shaped backpack. The little girl climbed onto the seat across from Ethan and talked about school while coloring, and Clara laughed beside her, sunlight warming her face. Ethan usually stayed silent, listening. He didn't always follow Luna's stories, but he understood something deeper. He was coming back to life. Clara made him forget the wheelchair, the line between normal and broken. She never rushed to help, never pitied him. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a man, not a patient, not a project. A man. Luna adored him. She called him Funny Mr. Ethan and covered the fridge with drawings of 3 people under a bright sun titled Our House with the Slide. Every time he saw them, he smiled, and somewhere deep inside, something took root, something he didn't dare to name. He was falling in love. That early summer evening, Clara had been invited to a charity gala for architecture and construction. Ethan went with her, his first public appearance in years. The ballroom shimmered with golden lights, laughter, and soft jazz. Clara, in an emerald green dress, moved through the crowd with effortless grace. Watching her speak, poised and radiant, Ethan felt something close to pride and fear. While he was talking to a potential investor, a middle-aged woman approached. "You're Ethan Navarro, aren't you? I read your interview. Fascinating work. And Miss Mendez? What an admirable woman, still designing for accessibility after her husband's passing. So brave." Ethan froze. The smile on his lips vanished. "Her husband?" he asked quietly. "Yes, poor man. Heart failure. The last few months he was in a wheelchair too." She smiled politely and drifted away, leaving Ethan rooted to the floor. Wheelchair, her husband. The words echoed, each one heavier than the last. He looked at Clara across the room, still smiling, still luminous. And for the first time, that smile terrified him. That night, Ethan sat in the dark, laptop glowing cold before him. He typed, Clara Mendez plus Miguel Mendez. The results flooded in. Articles, photos, videos. One clip stood out, help Miguel Mendez in his fight against heart disease. In the video, Clara looked younger, thinner, holding baby Luna. Behind her sat Miguel, frail, pale, smiling bravely. In a wheelchair almost identical to Ethan's. His hand trembled as he slammed the laptop shut. But the image stayed. Clara, Luna, and another man in his place. Shame, jealousy, and guilt collided inside him, a storm he couldn't control. Every word Clara had said, every touch, every look, twisted in his mind. Was she seeing Miguel in me? Was I just her way of healing? The thought poisoned him. He stopped sleeping, stopped answering calls. When Clara showed up at his office 3 days later, Ethan was ready, armed with cruelty disguised as protection. "You disappeared for days," she said, placing a lunchbox on his desk. "I was worried." Ethan looked up, eyes cold. "Tell me the truth, Clara. What am I to you? A project? A second chance to fix what you couldn't with Miguel?" Her face went blank. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" "I saw the video. Your husband, Miguel, he used a wheelchair too. You said you learned about accessibility too late, and then you met me. How convenient." Her lips parted, voice trembling. "No, you're wrong." "I'm not. You needed redemption, and I fit the part perfectly." The room went still. Only the clock ticked between them. Finally, Clara drew a shaky breath, eyes shining but steady. "Miguel made me promise I'd keep living, that I'd love again, that I wouldn't turn his death into a cage. Meeting you, loving you, that's not redemption, Ethan. It's proof I kept my promise." He looked away. "I don't want to be anyone's proof." "No," she said softly. "You just want to stay the victim in your own story." The words hit like a slap. Clara grabbed her bag, tears streaming unchecked. "You have everything, money, talent, second chances, but you lack the one thing that matters, the courage to be loved." The door closed with a sharp click that echoed through the room. Ethan sat there, the sound still ringing in his chest. The wheels of his chair moved against the marble floor, slow, hollow. For the first time in years, he truly felt crippled, not because of his legs, but because his heart was too afraid to move forward. That night, Lisbon was veiled in a mist-like rain. Ethan sat in his dark apartment, a bottle of whiskey on the table beside an open laptop. The screen was frozen on a frame from an old video, Clara holding Luna. He didn't know how many times he had watched that scene. Each time, the ache in his chest tightened, as if someone were squeezing his heart with bare hands. He didn't know how much he had drunk, only that when the clock struck midnight, he wheeled himself out of the house, carrying something he couldn't name, anger, regret, or simply the fear of being forgotten. When he stopped in front of Clara's door, the rain had ceased. The light inside was still on. He knocked, an awkward knock from a man who no longer believed in forgiveness. The door opened. Clara stood there in a thin sweater, her face tired and her eyes swollen. "Ethan?" Her voice was hoarse, a mix of surprise and exhaustion. He opened his mouth, but words failed him. Only alcohol and remorse filled the silence. "I'm sorry. A small sob broke from behind her. Luna, wearing unicorn pajamas, stepped out of her room, her eyes red and puffy. "Mom's sad because of you," she whispered. "You made her cry." Ethan lowered his head, unable to face her, but Luna went on, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My dad didn't choose to leave, but you did. That's worse." Clara quickly pulled the girl into her arms, trembling. "Luna, go to your room, sweetheart." But the child kept her gaze fixed on Ethan, her clear eyes sharp as a blade. "I thought you were my friend." The door closed. The sound of the lock was dry and final. Ethan stayed there, staring at the wooden door, listening to the fading footsteps inside, until there was nothing. Only silence. For the first time in years, he cried, not from physical pain, but from an emptiness so deep that no words could fill it. 3 weeks passed. No messages, no calls. The world around him seemed drained of color. He worked mechanically, avoided people, barely left the apartment. One morning, Patricia, his assistant, showed up unannounced. She placed a crumpled piece of paper on his desk, its corner still smudged with bits of crayon. "I found this in the contract drawer. I think Luna left it here one day." Ethan looked down. It was a child's drawing, 3 people holding hands under the sun, a dog beside them, and above, the words scribbled clumsily, "My new family." In the corner, there was a little heart, cracked, patched with a strip of pink tape. He didn't realize he was crying until a tear fell onto the drawing, blurring the blue color of the wheelchair. The next day, he went to a small building near Rocio Square. On a brass plaque, the name read, Dr. Isabel Costa, psychotherapist. Inside the bright, quiet office, Isabel sat across from him, a middle-aged woman with sharp yet gentle eyes. "What do you want to talk about, Ethan?" "About what I've destroyed." "What do you think you've destroyed?" "The only thing that ever made me feel alive." They met weekly. At first, Ethan spoke little, but session by session, his layers of defense began to fall away. He told her about the accident, about losing all sensation below the waist, about how everyone he'd loved had left after seeing him in the wheelchair. He confessed that his fear of abandonment was so strong he would always leave first. One morning, Isabel asked, "When you watch those old videos before the accident, what do you see?" "A man who was confident, successful, happy." "No," Isabel said firmly. "I see an arrogant, lonely man who thought his worth came from his legs and his status. He was never truly happy. And maybe, just maybe, that accident saved him." Ethan went silent. Her words pierced the part of him he'd kept hidden the longest. After 5 sessions, he began to understand. What had paralyzed him wasn't the accident, but the belief that he didn't deserve love. That night, he couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered outside his window, and for the first time, he didn't feel trapped. He just felt unfinished. There was one more thing he needed to do before he could begin again. A few days later, Ethan visited Paralyzed Cemetery. He searched for a long time before finding a simple headstone. Miguel Mendez, 1988-2021. Beloved husband and father. He sat there, no flowers, no rehearsed words, just a man before the grave of someone who had, in an invisible way, reshaped his life. "Hello?" he said softly. "I'm Ethan, the man who loved your wife and hurt her." A gentle breeze carried the scent of damp earth. "I don't know if this is allowed, but thank you for teaching her how to live again, for making her strong enough to believe in me, even when I didn't deserve it." He smiled faintly, voice trembling. "I used to think I was trapped by my legs. Turns out it was my cowardly heart that was the real prison." He lowered his head and whispered, "I can't promise to be perfect, but I'll try to become the man she saw in me. Thank you, Miguel, for helping her love again, and for teaching me not to run anymore." The wind stirred the grass gently, as if nodding in reply. When Ethan left the cemetery, he felt something he hadn't known in 5 years. Peace. 3 weeks after the visit to the cemetery, Ethan woke earlier than usual. Lisbon's sky was pale gray, the breeze carrying the scent of salt and church bells. He put on a light blue shirt, chose a small bouquet of daisies, and drove to the elementary school where he knew Luna studied. He hadn't called ahead. He didn't know what he expected. He only knew that, for the first time in years, he wasn't running away. The schoolyard buzzed with laughter. Ethan stopped near the gate, heart racing. When the bell rang, children poured out in bright little waves. Among them, he spotted Luna, hair in twin braids, the same cat-shaped backpack bouncing behind her. She froze when she saw him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan said quietly, "I'm late, aren't I?" Luna didn't answer. Her wide eyes shimmered with tears. "I was a coward," he continued, "and you were right. I hurt your mom. I'm sorry." The wind rustled and the petals of his daisies trembled. Luna bit her lip, then suddenly ran forward and threw her arms around him. "Don't go again," she whispered. "Mom's really sad." "I promise," Ethan murmured, holding her tight, feeling the warmth of her small body sink into him like sunlight after a storm. A familiar voice came from behind. "Luna, time to go." Clara stood there, a folder in one hand, her face calm, but her eyes uncertain. She wore a gray blouse, her hair tied back, looking tired, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Ethan turned toward her. The world seemed to fall silent. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness," he said. "I don't deserve that. I just came to tell you the truth, that you are the best thing that's ever happened to me. And if I could, I'd like to try again. This time, without fear." Clara didn't answer for a long moment. Her eyes flickered with 1,000 things. Pain, caution, and something fragile that looked like hope. "Ethan," she whispered, "I can't survive losing someone again. Not for me, but for Luna. She's already lost one father." "I know," he said softly, "and that's exactly why I'm not leaving again." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it touched hers. "You were right. I've been the victim of my own story for too long, but I don't want to live that way anymore. No more running, no more hiding behind metal and wheels. I just want to stay." Clara looked at him, eyes glistening. Luna glanced up between them, tugging at her mother's hand. "Mom, let Mr. Ethan stay." A quiet sigh escaped Clara's lips. She knelt down to Luna's level, then lifted her gaze to the man before her. No longer arrogant, no longer afraid, just human. "All right," she said softly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "If you're really going to stay, then stay for real." Ethan nodded. He didn't need more words. He handed her the daisies, simple, honest, alive, the kind of flowers that meant beginning again. Clara took them, lowering her head slightly, and for the first time since that terrible day, Ethan saw her smile. Just a small one, but enough to make the air around them feel lighter. That evening they walked along the Tagus River. Luna ran ahead, collecting stones, laughing. Clara walked beside him, quiet, her steps in rhythm with the sound of the water. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Some kinds of peace come without words, the kind that arrives when you no longer have to prove anything, only be present. Clara finally turned to him, her voice soft as dusk. "You've really changed, Ethan." He smiled faintly. "I just stopped being afraid." She nodded, her expression gentler now. "Then maybe this is where the real beginning starts." Ethan looked out at the river where the last light melted into the waves. Inside him, something small but steady took shape. Faith. For the first time, he believed he could love and be loved without running anymore. 3 months after his return, summer had settled over Lisbon. The sea was blue, the skies high, and laughter filled Clara's apartment, like a new melody each morning. Ethan came almost every day, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He helped Luna with her homework, fixed a few things around the apartment. The days blurred into something natural, gentle. One evening, Clara said, "This weekend, I want you and Luna to come with me somewhere." The place was a beach house in Cascais, one Ethan had built 2 years ago, but never lived in. He used to call it the empty house. When they arrived, the late sun painted gold across white walls and glass windows that opened to the sea. Luna gasped, eyes wide. "This is your house. It's huge, and there's a pool." Ethan smiled softly. "Yes, but it never felt like home." Clara walked through the doorway, studying every detail, the smooth ramp from the porch to the living room, the wide corridors, the elegantly adapted bathroom. She turned to him, her eyes warm. "You designed all this yourself?" "I oversaw it, but I never stayed here. Back then, I built it to forget. Now I want to live, to remember." She smiled. "Then let's start here." That first night, they dined on the terrace facing the ocean. Luna chased a neighbor's cat, while Ethan and Clara sat at a wooden table, wine glowing red in the sunset. "You know," Clara said softly, "I used to think I was only capable of building houses for others. Safe, strong ones. I forgot that some homes aren't made of bricks." He looked at her, curious. "Then what are they made of?" "Of trust," she replied. "And you can only build them when you stop fearing you'll lose them." They fell quiet. The sound of the waves filled the silence like a heartbeat. Then Clara set down her glass, hesitating. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you. Maybe it's too soon, but I want more children. With you." Ethan froze. He didn't laugh, didn't speak. She rushed to explain, her voice trembling. "I know your condition complicates things. I don't expect anything. I just need to know if it's something you want too." Ethan reached for her hand, steady but gentle. "I've thought about it," he said slowly. "I talked to my doctor. It's possible. But the real question isn't, can I? It's should I? Am I good enough to be a father?" Clara's eyes softened. "You already are one. You're there for Luna. You teach her that love isn't something to fear. What else could being a father mean?" He smiled faintly. "I never thought I'd hear anyone say that to me." "That's because you never believed you deserved it," she whispered. "But Luna believes. I believe." He pulled her close. Beneath the silver moonlight and the rhythm of the tide, they kissed, a promise more than a gesture, fragile, yet certain. The next morning, Ethan taught Luna how to make pancakes, the kitchen filled with the smell of butter and laughter. Clara stood at the doorway, watching, the man who once feared everything now, laughing with her daughter, letting her smear flour on his face. The sight brought tears to her eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that, for the first time in years, she was truly living. That afternoon, they went down to the beach. Ethan rolled his chair to the edge of the water, Luna holding his hand. "Are you afraid of the sea?" she asked. "No," he smiled. "In the water, I'm the freest I've ever been. Down there, my legs don't matter." The light danced on the water, scattering into 1,000 shards, pieces of the past turning into something beautiful. Ethan looked at them, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you," he whispered. "Both of you." Clara smiled through her tears. "I know, and I love you, not for what you lost, but for what you dared to find again." The waves lapped softly at the shore, and there, in that vast horizon, they didn't need to speak anymore. Everything worth saying was already in the way they looked at each other, whole, peaceful, and real. That afternoon, the Sea of Cascais shimmered the same blue as in his memories. The sun tilted gently, pouring gold over the water like melted memory. The small beach house stood with its windows open to summer, letting in the salt and the sound of waves. It was the house where they had promised to begin again. And this time, they truly had. Since that day, Ethan no longer measured time by therapy sessions or unfinished projects, but by Clara's laughter. By every moment, Luna ran to him with sand on her hands. The house was no longer a symbol of what he had lost. It had become proof of what he'd found. A family, a place to belong. That morning, Luna's laughter filled the room. She was tying ribbons around a flower basket. "Mom, I'm done!" she shouted, curls bouncing in the light. Clara stood by the window, wearing a simple white dress, smiling with a glow that words couldn't capture. Ethan sat by the table in his wheelchair, dressed in a cream suit, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. "You're nervous," Clara teased. He smiled. "No, just not used to feeling this." Luna ran up and placed a tiny handkerchief in his hand, embroidered with LCE. "Luna, Clara, Ethan. I made it for you, so you won't be scared." Ethan laughed softly, brushing her hair. He wasn't afraid anymore. The ceremony took place right there, on the sand behind the house where they had once watched the sunset. No luxury, no excess, just a few close friends, a few colleagues, and the ocean. Clara walked barefoot across the sand, her white dress fluttering in the breeze, her smile a quiet kind of forgiveness. Luna went ahead, scattering petals, and as Clara drew closer, Ethan felt the world dissolve, until all that remained was the sound of his own heartbeat. Slow, steady, full. "You came?" he whispered. "You stayed," she replied. They stood before the sea, hand in hand. The officiant smiled. "Every true love begins when two hearts choose to stay. Now, it's time for your vows." Clara looked at him, eyes glimmering with the tenderness only those who've known loss can hold. "Ethan," she said, voice soft as surf, "I promise to love you in stillness and in motion, on wheels or on feet, in fear and in courage. Because you are not just the man I love, you're my home." Ethan squeezed her hand, his voice breaking. "Clara, I promise to be your shelter, and Luna's. I won't run again, no matter what. You taught me that strength doesn't live in the legs, but in the heart brave enough to stay." When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan pulled her close. The kiss wasn't loud, but it was deep, a quiet eternity in the sound of waves. Luna yelled, "Finally!" and laughter rippled across the sand like sunlight. 2 years passed as softly as a breath. Afternoon light poured through white curtains onto drawings and toys. Ethan sat holding two babies, twins, a boy and a girl, while Luna, now 8, colored beside him. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "My family," she answered proudly. In her picture, there was a man in a wheelchair, a brown-haired woman holding two babies, and a little girl reaching for the sky. In the corner, she'd drawn a full pink heart, whole, unbroken. Clara entered with a glass of juice, smiling. "What do you think about taking them to the beach this afternoon?" Ethan looked up, eyes warm. "Like our first day here?" "Yes," she said, sitting beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Remember when I told you I only knew how to build houses for others?" "I remember." "Well," she whispered, squeezing his hand, "I finally built one for myself." Outside, the sea hummed softly, endless and kind. Ethan looked at Clara, at Luna, at the twins asleep in his arms. No legs could have carried him this far. Only love could. "I don't need to stand anymore," he said quietly, "because I've found where I belong." Clara smiled, kissed his forehead. "And I finally learned to open doors instead of building walls." Luna looked up, holding her drawing high. "Mom, I finished." Clara laughed. "It's beautiful." "I know," Luna said, "because this time nobody's sad anymore." Ethan looked out at the sea. The sunset dripped honey over the waves. In that golden silence, he understood. Happiness was never about rising from the chair. It was about sitting beside someone, holding their hand, looking into their eyes and saying, "I'm here, and I'll always stay." If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Sometimes love stories aren't about perfection. They're about staying, even when it's hard. Tell us which moment moved you most in the comments. And if you'd like more stories that remind us of the beauty of second chances, stay with us here on Noah's Stories, where every ending is a beginning.